This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, Brandon Sanderson disciples? This is Stephen, your host from Fantology Podcast, along with my lifelong friends Ryan and Josh. And I'm really excited for this episode because I've been at Dragonsteel Con the last 2 days and have been eagerly awaiting my opportunity to just like totally nerd out and do an info dump of the whole experience. I thought it was awesome. Spoiler alert. So I'm just going to kind of like rave about it, I guess. But Ryan and Josh were not able to come, but I'm hoping that in the future you're able to. Anyway, I'm going to let you just both kind of ask questions and we'll see. I think I'll probably just kind of rave about it for a while. Anyway, Ryan, you had an opening question, so let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear about this because I'm kind of I'm experiencing this vicariously through you. But anyways, so you went to Dragonsteel, was it 2 years ago?
No, so last year they did a mini con. They called it a mini con. It was down in Provo, which is, if you're not familiar with Utah, it's probably 30-40 minutes south, maybe like an hour south of Salt Lake, actually smaller college town. Anyway, that was just for Cytonic. And I honestly don't know how Cosmere focused it was. I'm sure they had Cosmere stuff because that's what everyone likes to talk about, but it was smaller. And so this was the first year where they had like a full on con. Last year was a mini con, still kind of, I think it might have just been 1 day. I'm actually not sure. Maybe correct me if you were there. But no, I have not. We've been to other release things, all of us, but nothing on this scale, guys. Nothing on this scale before.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my question, was how did this compare to the one you've been before? And so I guess, so that other one was more a release event for Cytonic, whereas this was just kind of a general celebration of
I think the Cytonic one, they did have some kind of con type of things, but this was the first time they went really big with it. They rented out the convention center in Salt Lake, which is a very big venue. This is where they have big tech conferences. It's like the venue if you're hosting a convention in Utah at the Salt Palace. And they sold over 6,000 tickets, and it was packed. There were a lot of people there, and I was very impressed with it.
And we also had members of our Fantology Discord who traveled to go there to Dragonsteel Con.
Yeah, that was fun. It's fun to kind of meet some internet friends that I have only chatted with before, and I had a good experience doing that. Met some random people as well. It's fun because you show up at this convention for Brandon Sanderson, and you can literally just talk to any person there, and you know that you both have like a deep, passionate, common interest that is really easy to talk about. So like I just felt this kinship with everyone there. It was fun. It was a fun feeling.
I do love when I like meet somebody new, and like we both love to read epic fantasy and can bond over that. At my new job that I started in the middle of July, I always try and bring that up. Like, oh, I really like to read like epic fantasy, science fiction. Like, have you ever heard of Brandon Sanderson? And so far, nobody's noticed, or nobody has heard of them. And so I'm always like slightly let down when they don't. But so I definitely get that. It's like everybody is brought together with a common interest that we all love to talk about, but not everybody on the street is the same.
I have a coworker, just kind of on this tangent, continuing, who shares an Audible with her like brother, or her brothers and her all share an Audible, and her brothers are all into Sanderson. So she's like read most of Sanderson, but she's not like super into it. Like whenever I try talking to her about things, she's like, oh yeah, I guess I remember that happening. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because like I'm super passionate about it and like love it. And she's like, oh yeah, I remember reading about that, but like doesn't really care, and like didn't know that.
Like,
the
how are you so calm about this right now?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's just kind of funny.
Yeah, most of the people there are going to be obviously on the passionate side if you're willing to,
for sure.
Yeah, to take off work or whatever and travel. I mean, a lot of people from out of town. It was in Utah. There's a lot of local Utah people, obviously, but a lot of people traveled across the country.
So were there a lot of cosplayers there?
Oh yeah, a lot of cosplay. It was the Mistborn release, so there was probably maybe a little bit more Mistborn cosplay, lots of Mist cloaks. That's a pretty easy cosplay to do. So I think a lot of people went with that. There's some really cool Inquisitors. There was one guy especially who had the spikes through his eyes, out the back of his head. He was bald. He looked like an Inquisitor. It was very impressive. I'm actually not even sure how he did it. It looked very realistic. Must have had some kind of like lens that he was looking through.
Was that the best costume you saw? Or cosplay, I guess I should say.
There was, I mean, that was maybe the most dedicated one because it was influencing his eyesight the whole time, which I think was probably pretty challenging. There were other Inquisitors or maybe just other like people with hemorrhagic spikes. I think there was maybe at least one or two other Inquisitors that were not quite as cool as this guy. There were a lot of people in kind of like Stormlight Archive garb. I don't remember the Havana, I think is the name of the women's garb, maybe, if I'm getting that right. There was a lot of like Alethi uniforms. There were several women dressed up in kind of like Marisi Steris type outfits that were pretty cool. Trying to think if there's any other standouts. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of cosplay. There was a cosplay competition, and if you were in cosplay, people were getting rewards a lot. So the way it works, I haven't been to a lot of cons, but they had this like internal coinage reward system. So if you were doing something like really, really cool, or you had cool cosplay, or you were doing some of the kind of side things that were happening around, then the Dragonsteel staff was handing out coins, which you could then redeem for prizes. I didn't get that into it, mostly because I just didn't really, I don't know, I guess I'm not an experienced con person, or I didn't have enough gumption to really try to insert myself in that way. I was more of an observer, I would say. But there was a lot of really cool things, and I think I mean, next time I go back, I want to try to get more on that side of things and really like go all the way in. It was kind of like, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Evermore. It's this theme park in Utah where they have a similar type of thing. There's like a story that you can do, and you can go around and talk to people, and there's hidden things around, or you can just kind of like wander around and enjoy it. And I was more on like the wander around and enjoy it and go to the panels and participate in the things that were happening. But I wasn't quite on the like earn coins, get rewards type of thing. Yeah.
What were some of the rewards you could get?
Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly. There was a really long line for the rewards. There was just so much going on all the time. I feel like I kind of missed that part of it. I know that there were broadsheets from each book. You know, they're the broadsheet pages, and each book I think has 4 pages. So if you put them together, you'd obviously have like a whole newspaper. And so they had printed out.
Mistborn.
Yeah, from Era to Mistborn. Yeah, so they had 4 of the printed out, like fully connected broadsheets, and I got 2 of them just from kind of like getting them handed out to me because the thing was winding down and they had a bunch of extras. But I know if you got all 4 of them, you could flip it over and you'd have like a really big map of Ellendale. So the broadsheets were some of the rewards, and I'm sure there was other cool stuff, but I never had any coins. So I didn't bother to wait in the really long line to redeem my coins that I didn't have for the cool things.
So what were some of your favorite events that you went to within the convention?
So I think my favorite one was the trivia. The trivia thing that went on for like, yeah, I like trivia. Everyone likes trivia. It went on for like a solid 2 hours. They had several different categories. and there was probably like 500 to 600 people participating. And if you were in the top 50, then you got coins. If you were like, and if you won, you got a lot of coins, basically is how it worked. And I never got top 50. The best I got was like 60 something in the Stormlight Archive category, which I know the best. And I would have got top 50 if I hadn't missed an easy question about which way the storms blow in Roshar. For some reason I hit west to east instead of east to west, which is, yeah, I don't know. I choked, I guess.
That's impressive, because I remember going for the Oathbringer release, they did a trivia, and there are some very, in my opinion, like obscure questions, and like things that I probably wouldn't even know if I had just finished a reread of the books, but people are, getting like, I'm sure there are people that didn't miss a single question on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, for as into Brandon Sanderson as we are, there's a whole nother level, and that was on display at the con, which is really nice to, like, it's fun to see people that are that passionate, because I'm really passionate, but there are people who are just like way more, and it's fun to see that.
I feel like even if I wrote a book, like I still wouldn't know it as well as some of these people know Stormlight Archive.
Well, that's kind of how Sanderson is. I feel like he has is her name Karen? That's his like continuity editor.
Karen and Peter, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, you figure they probably know more of those obscure things than he does at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Karen's the one that manages the internal wiki. There was a lot of Q&A. There were two different times for Q&A for Sanderson. One was the spoiler, one was the non-spoiler, and there were a lot of pretty specific questions that were asked. And he fielded them all. I think he knows his books.
Oh yeah, but for sure.
Yeah, no, the questions got very specific stuff that, I mean, a lot of times when the questions get that specific, I just kind of roll my eyes and I'm like, what is the point of this question? Like, this will never be important. But I don't know, maybe every now and then people hit on something.
Yeah, I mean, I think people do. Like, even leading up to the Lost Metal release, there were some people that were posting things that like would have sounded super obscure a few years ago, but are now like super mainstream in the Cosmere, Well, I guess I don't want to spoil anything for the Lost Metal, but if you know what I'm talking about.
We still shouldn't spoil Lost Metal because it is really recent and we're not going to. But I will say, having read Lost Metal going in, I felt like I had a little extra knowledge. And when some topics came up that were important for Lost Metal, I was like, okay, like I know all about this.
Were there any questions somebody asked Brandon that he said, read and find out, that you knew the answer to?
I think there were two, and I don't remember what they were, but they were specifically about the Lost Metal, or Brandon kind of like danced around it and he said like, oh, you'll see a little bit more of this in the Lost Metal. And I was thinking like, oh, yes, you will.
Nice.
All right. So what was the nerdiest thing you saw at the convention, Stephen? Like, was there anything that happened and you're just like, these are my people? I mean, you've kind of touched on this, but
anything that was just like even beyond what I
don't know, just like you kind of mentioned the costumes being all out. I guess that would be a good example, but like, just maybe you like pass by this conversation, they were like deep in conversation about like some super obscure thing, and just, I don't know, general things like that.
I'm sure there were those moments. Honestly, I was so into it that I was like, okay, I'll join right into the conversation. Like I'm here for that. I think maybe some of the nerdiest things were, so they had a big vendor exhibit hall, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But one side of it was just a bunch of board games, and it was a big open space with a bunch of tables. And so you could grab whatever game. They had a ton of games. You could just grab them and start playing them. And for some reason, I thought this was like the nerdiest thing there, because I don't know. I don't know if I would really want to like sit down and play. Like, I like board games, but at the same time, like playing a nerdy board game at the nerd Brandon Sanderson convention was just I don't know. I guess
It might be
I
a good
would
way to
separate
like make
those a little bit more.
friends.
Yeah, for sure, to make friends. And I don't want to like bash on anyone who enjoyed playing board games, but I just felt like I was there to go to the con and do the panels and stuff. And but yeah, if I had nothing to do, or had some downtime, because
Did
there
you
were some hours where there weren't as many panels that I was interested in. And I didn't go for the entire time. I came late one of the days, so I could see myself getting kind of tired of it and wanting to just sit down and play games. So maybe I'll
Did
retract
you-
that, but for some reason I thought it was very nerdy.
did you see anybody dueling with shard blades?
Yes. There was
See,
a big ring. There was a ring where you could duel with shard blades. Maybe that's the nerdiest thing that I saw.
That's what I would think would be pretty nerdy, is if
Mhm.
somebody was dueling with shard blades. But I mean, if I
You
had
know
a huge shard
the-
blade, I'd want to duel somebody too.
You know the big foam shard blades that you can buy that they sell? Have you seen these?
Is it on Brandon's website or someplace else?
Yeah, it's actually called Forged Foam. I'm sure you can get to it from Brandon's website, but they have Oathbringer, Maya, they have a Sill Spear, they have Nightblood, they might have one or two more swords that you can buy. And they had these for sale, as well as like Bridge Forest shields. And so a lot of people had these, and there was a ring where you could grab your sword and duel.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be a little bit nerdier than board games. And
Yeah,
this
I'll go with that. I'm
ner-
changing my answer. Board
nerdy
games are
is
fine.
and nerdy is like a compliment, right? Like this is you want to
yeah.
be nerdy at this
Yeah.
convention, so please don't feel
That's
called
the
out.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's dedication.
Yeah.
Passion.
So in the vendor hall, they also had like real metal replicas of Nightblood and the Sill Spear that you could hold and take pictures with. And they had this little thing called the Hoyd Museum of Curiosities that you could go through that had some like little relics from the Cosmere. Like there was like a Koloss skin and some glass daggers and maybe some other things. But I actually didn't go in because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to fit with my wheelchair, and the line was super long, so I didn't want to wait in a long line. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't go in, but I did see pictures of the stuff inside, and it looked cool. Looked like it was worth waiting in line for.
I tuned into most of Sanderson's non-spoiler, like the one that was live streamed on YouTube, and he mentioned that he wanted to eventually create like a Cosmere museum.
Okay,
and I thought that was super awesome.
This is the announcement that I thought was the coolest thing from the entire con. And so I just happened to go to this one panel about Dragonsteel moving from Brandon's garage to what they called a village. And they were kind of coy about like, what does this mean, a village, right? Because they don't really have a village. They just have warehouses, but they are building what they're calling a village in 2 to 5 years. And they didn't this is not like publicly announced, or Brandon hasn't written anything about it. He did talk about it in his live stream that you saw, Josh. So I think it's fine if we talk about it like they talked about it in the panel. It's not secret or anything. But they showed us a picture of Isaac Stewart's drawing of what the village is supposed to look like. And they did ask us not to take pictures of that. So I don't have that, but I can tell you that it looked really cool. It looked like kind of an 1800s manor type thing. It was based off the Biltmore estate, if you know what that is, in North Carolina. So it's going to look really cool. It's going to be the Dragonsteel headquarters. They're going to have a store there. They're going to have like a little museum of stuff. Brandon mentioned that he wanted to put like his original outline for the Cosmere and the #1 Elantris book that Dan Wells has. He wanted to put those things in the village and kind of like make it into an experience. So you go, you can buy stuff, you can hang out, you can get like little Cosmere things. Anyway, it sounds really cool. And they said they want to have it built in 2 to 5 years. So I think they're starting to get momentum towards it. It's hard to say when that will actually happen, but I'm really looking forward to going to the village.
Is this supposed to be in southern, like kind of south of Provo still?
It'll be around
Is that where they
like Pleasant
yeah.
Grove, American Fork, where Brandon lives and where the Dragonsteel HQ is now. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's right over kind of where I live.
Nice. That's awesome.
I thought when you said a village, he was like building a village for like his employees to like live in.
Like a campus.
Yeah, it's like the Brandon Sanderson campus.
I'd start to get a little bit worried about that at that point.
Uh-huh. The compound.
There's the company town ran by Brandon Sanders.
Uh-huh. I mean, I'll be honest, there were moments in the live stream that you saw, Josh. It felt a little bit like a cult. There were probably 1,500 to 2,000 people all just like cheering for Brandon Sanderson, going crazy. He was up there talking for 2 hours. Like there was the lights and the music and everything. And there was probably some cult vibes, but I was there for it.
So what were some of like the booths that you saw? Like were they other authors?
Yeah, so in the vendor hall, which was always really packed, but I mean, there was a lot of interest around there. So there was the museum thing, the Hoyd thing with the artifacts. There were a bunch of other authors, which was really cool because Brandon said that he wanted this, part of what they wanted to do with the con was to promote other authors, because authors go to cons but are often overshadowed when Henry Cavill shows up, right? Because no one really cares about the author when you have the actor. So this one, they tried to highlight other authors, and they probably had like 10 or so other authors there. And honestly, I didn't recognize any of them other than Brian McClellan. But they had a lot of traffic through there, and they all sold a lot of books. And I thought, I'm sure it was a great thing for all these other authors. So I thought that was kind of cool how, Brandon was trying to maybe pay it forward a little bit and help out some of his colleagues.
I remember how Brandon talked about in the class that we took with him, like kind of the traditional way of getting into like getting published was like going to conventions and like trying to like bring your manuscripts and like find agents there and like talking with agents. And so maybe this is kind of his way of being like, it would have been easier if there was more representation that I could have gone to or had at a convention.
Real quick, going back to the cultist vibes things, I just thought it was funny. I watched it. I watched the video. Yeah. Did you guys see like the Mr. Beast like opened his burger joint at the mall?
Yeah, I did watch that.
Similar. I don't know. It's just kind of weird because it's just these people are celebrities in a way that we're not used to really celebrities being, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think if you had like Taylor Swift, like thousands of people cheering for Taylor Swift during a performance, like you wouldn't think that was weird, but because it's not somebody who typically would get these type of responses,
when it's someone who's more of like, seems more like a common man or woman of the people and is up there with the big following, you're just like, what the heck?
Yeah versus when they're like, a beautiful manufactured celebrity, it's kind of like, okay, this is appropriate for everybody to be going crazy over it. But when it's just like a kid from like the Midwest, or like, well, I guess for both Sanderson and Mr. Beast, it's like you don't really expect that. Like they're not particularly like, it's, I don't want to say they're like not good looking, but like it's not like they're like super
they don't
beautiful,
have the
attractive.
traditional vibes of being famous.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like famous because they do cool things, and I don't know. Anyway, that was just a tangent, but I thought it was applicable.
Yeah.
Were there any notable booktubers or podcasters there that you saw?
Daniel Green was there.
Nice.
He was on 3 of the panels, and I went to 2 of them. I went to, so the first panel I went to was the Wheel of Time panel with Matt Hatch and Daniel Green. and Jason Denzel, who's an author and also runs the Dragon Mount website, and another lady that I actually wasn't sure who she was, but they just talked about the upcoming season 2 and some things. And I thought that panel was really good. And I mean, obviously that's like what Matt has done for years, is run panels and discussions like that. So it went really smooth and it was really entertaining the whole time. They took questions. A lot of panels just took questions throughout, and there were some fun questions, some kind of goofy questions, but that panel was probably one of the highlights. And compared to compared that panel to another panel that I didn't like as much, which was called the Cosmere Survival Guide, which was like, you're in the Cosmere and you're like, you are like, I, Stephen, am in the Cosmere. How do you survive, right? And so they kind of like talked about, oh, these planets would be dangerous and here's what I would need. And then they just kind of took questions. So they had like 5 minutes, like literally like 5 minutes of material ready. And then they just answered questions. And so Daniel Green was on this panel as well, with a couple Dragonsteel people, I think, and Lauren McCaffrey, who her and her husband do stuff with Tor. So the whole time Daniel Green was just like goofing around, and like, he's funny, you know, he had some comedic appeal to things, but I just got the vibe that he was just kind of like covering for not knowing how to answer the deep questions with just making jokes the whole time. And it got a little old, and I was just kind of,
as you could expect, though. I mean, that's probably going to happen, right?
well,
like,
I mean, that's fair. And like, honestly, I would probably do the same type
thing.
of thing.
Yeah. I was going to say, this sounds like a YouTube video that we would put together for like one of our top things.
It does sound like, yeah.
Yeah. And then we would,
I guess I was expecting maybe a little more preparation for this panel. But to be fair, you know, these guys, like Daniel Green did 3 panels. So yeah. But that panel was a little disappointing. I thought there was a lot more they could have done with that, but they just kind of winged it.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah. So anything, I'm trying to think of other things that I was having FOMO on.
I could tell you, okay, so a couple of things that I thought were interesting from the Q&A and just from some general comments was there were like 2 or 3 times where there was some speculation on, okay, Adonalsium is like the power, right? And there were some questions as to, well, is there like an oppositional force to Adonalsium? And Brandon fielded this question, and he mentioned, I want to say he mentioned this, or maybe it was in a different panel about the secret projects, but there was some discussion about the Aethers being older than Adonalsium and potentially not being tied to investiture in the same way that he was. And so they could be oppositional forces. And this one guy from the secret, I don't know who this guy was, but he had a lot to say and he was pretty smart. But he was on the panel for the secret project discussion. And he had this whole theory about how Adonalsium is not like the real god, like the Aethers are kind of like really the things driving it, and Adonalsium is kind of like the front for that. So the Aethers are Brandon's from Brandon's book Aether of Night, and they're from a different planet, hasn't been actually written, and they're going to be more and more a part of the Cosmere going forward, which was a comment that Brandon made in the spoiler Q&A, and they predate Adonalsium.
Okay, all right.
They're kind of like primal powers, and he's changed the way that originally he wrote them with like there's only 4 of them, and now he was talking about maybe having like 12 of them. Honestly, I don't know if he's really settled on exactly how they work yet.
Okay, sorry. So this person was saying that Adonalsium wasn't like the real god, that the Aethers predated them. What else?
Or Adonalsium was a god, but the Aethers had kind of like power that superseded him, potentially. Like there's another form of power out there that we're not really familiar with. Because right now we're like, okay, we get it. Adonalsium was shattered. They all have like these shards are scattered around, and each one of them has different powers. And that's how it all works. But there might be this whole other thing with the Aethers before him.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, that theory occurs in. Yeah. I don't want to spoil things, but that discussion
getting
happened.
more-
That
I
discussion
mean-
starts to happen.
Yeah. Brandon, it's a quote, Brandon. I mean, it's coming out more and more, and the Aethers are going to be important pretty soon. I also liked one of his quotes in the non-spoiler Q&A where he was talking about, I think you watched this, Josh, but he starts off his book releases with a little bit of a talk just about where he, like, some of his thoughts going into the release of whatever book it is. And so with The Lost Metal, he talked about kind of the inception of Era 2 and where it went and everything. And then eventually he got into the topic of, okay, I've got the interconnected Cosmere and it's there, but it's kind of behind the scenes still. So at what point do I make it into like the big thing and just kind of roll with it? And he said at this point, the gloves are off and the Cosmere is all fair game and books are really going to start crossing everything over. And he basically said, you know, he wanted to do this originally, but he knew he couldn't because it was maybe like too complicated. So he needed to build a following first. He couldn't just go straight for the super crazy connected thing, right? Because you kind of have to draw in an audience before you do this. But I think at this point, he's just like, I have 2,000 people here at this convention that are, you know, paying money to hear me talk and release this book. And I feel pretty confident that, you know, I've got a following and this is going to go well. So I'm just going to go for it.
I wonder though if that strategy kind of makes it like it makes it a bit harder to continue to get new readers, because if Brandon Sanderson comes out with like a brand new book and I'm like, wow, this is so good, then I can't immediately recommend that book to friends who don't know Brandon. I'm like, wow, this Sanderson book is so good, but you need to read Mistborn and Stormlight Archive and Elantris and like all of these books before you would be able to really grasp this book fully. So I mean, although he I agree, he does have like a lot of momentum and a big following. Like, I mean, maybe this increases the learning curve significantly for newer books. So you're not really, I mean, it's just hard to get new readers into those.
I think it really depends. I see your point there, and I think you might be right in that. Two thoughts though. One is that even just like reading the preview chapters on these secret projects, like it does still seem like he's still starting to, like, he can still tell smaller scale stories, kind of like something like the Emperor's Soul, which might tie into other books. Like that character might pop up later, such and such might happen, but like it's still a really entertaining read. And that's still like, I could recommend Emperor's Soul to literally anyone who might not know anything about the Cosmere and still like be confident that they'll have a good time. So I think he'll still put out books like that. At least I hope he does. And the secret projects kind of seem like stuff like they might be along that vein. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I hope he still will put out smaller scale books that are easier to recommend. The other thing is, I just think that he really wants like a interconnected, crazy, you know, cool thing like this to exist, and it kind of right now it doesn't. And so I think he wants it to exist, so he's going to write it, and he knows that he'll be able to be successful. Like it might lower his success a little bit, you know what I mean? But like I think he's going to go for it. He already probably has enough money that he needs for the rest of his life, so he knows he can live like a good life no matter what. And so he's going to create what like his inner artist is coming out, and that's what his artist wants to do. I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't really meant as like a criticism of what he's doing at all. It's just kind of like an observation. I mean, obviously it's a lot more fun to talk about like these and like theorize about the interconnectedness of these books. But like, I mean, you know, every time a new Marvel movie comes out, like I don't really see them anymore. If like a good movie comes out, then I'll like look up online. I'm like, okay, what do I need to know before I go see this movie? But I mean, I
think it's a preference thing to some degree. Like you can read Era 2 and you're not going to, if you haven't read his other stuff, you're not going to pick up on all the details, but you'll still have an enjoyable story. And then you'll know that, okay, these things are important. And I know other people are jumping off the couch and pointing at them when they come up. And maybe that's like some impetus to say, I want to read the rest of this stuff so I can understand what's going on here.
What I think he really has to be careful of is kind of the trap that Marvel Comics fell into, which was just trying to get you to read other comic series by having the tie-ins. You know what I mean? Like they would just force tie-ins where they probably did need to be, so that then you would be like, oh, now I need to go read this run of comics. I feel like that is what I would not want to have happen. But I don't think Sanderson's going to do that. I don't think he's just going to be like, oh, here's a random character and you really need to know the backstory. So now you need to go buy 5 more of my books. Like, I don't see him really doing that. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, here's this really interesting character that really adds a lot to the story. And if you don't read the other books, like he's good enough at doing characters that you can still get what you need to know about the character from that book. But like it would, for the fans out there, it's going to be fun. Anyway, that's my thoughts about it. I think he'll do it well.
He said when he turned in the third Mistborn book, Era 1, the conclusion to that trilogy, Tom Doherty, who runs Tor, was like, Brandon, what are you doing? You're ending things like, this Mistborn stuff, like this is really successful for you. You should just write 20 more of these. And at that point, Brandon wanted to do the trilogy of trilogies, which has since expanded. But so he kind of took a risk and he was like, no, I'm not, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to skip forward and now they're going to have guns and it's still Mistborn, but it's different. And there wasn't really many people that are doing that. He always likes to say Iron Man came out around the same time and that really helped him out because the conventional wisdom used to be that people did not like this. They liked more episodic things and they didn't have the attention or didn't care about the details of a big, continuous, interconnected thing. But now, I mean, the conventional wisdom is everyone likes the crossovers and they love the Marvel movies for like, okay, which characters are going to pop in? How's it all going to connect?
Yeah. And you get like Rings of Power being trash, or like people might not tune into it because it's not like a direct tie into the Jackson films. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So, getting back to the convention a little bit, are there any projects that Brandon's working on that really excited you? Or maybe anybody at Dragonsteel?
Yeah, so he announced, he didn't have any like big new announcements. He just reiterated that him and Dan Wells are going to be writing co-authoring some things, and Dan works for him now. They're going to start with the Dark One book, which is a graphic novel right now, but they're going to write it into a novelized form. And then in the future, him and Dan will be co-authoring some Cosmere things, which I assume will be more side things, maybe stuff like Warbreaker or a Launcher sequel type of stuff. But the thing I'm most excited for that Sanderson's working on is obviously Stormlight 5, which he wants to finish by January 1st, 2024. So it's ready for release in November of 2024 for Dragonsteel Con 2024, which I hope you guys can make it to. Because man,
Steven, you sound a bit like Trump right now when he announced he was running for president. He's like, got big things coming in 2024. 2024.
Oh no! Shoot. Okay.
You realize that's going to be 2 weeks after the election?
It's going to be the same time as the election.
Yeah, like 2-3 weeks after.
Which wasn't Rhythm of War released in 2020?
Yeah, it was because it was during COVID, so the release was all virtual.
So it was like kind of. So he's like on the election
presidential cycle. Yeah, presidential election cycle.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, maybe don't make plans for Dragonsteel Con 2024 because who knows, the world may not be standing after that election.
Gosh. Okay. All right. Well,
not to get too political, but I think everyone understands that that's a hot button topic.
Yeah, it is a hard time to travel because it's like, let's see,
right before Thanksgiving. Yeah.
So I will say I am supposed to have Thanksgiving in Utah. Probably, that's my in-laws' Thanksgiving year. My in-laws live in Utah, so I will probably be traveling up to Utah for Thanksgiving.
Just come up a little bit early. So just stay at your in-laws for 2 weeks.
Potentially, I might.
Yeah.
It's just so hard, man. So why
Dude,
does it have to be right before
I will make my
Thanksgiving?
place available to you in any way possible to make it work.
Okay.
Anyway,
I think 2 years in
we have
advance.
years to plan for
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Okay, two more things that I liked from the convention. So one thing was there was a moment in the trivia where everyone was like cheering for their favorite characters from Mistborn era 2 that I thought was interesting because everyone, they said, okay, cheer if your Wax is your favorite character, cheer if Wayne is your favorite character, Marcy, Steris, etc. And what do you guys? Okay, what do you
Steris.
think?
I think Steris is
who do you think people cheered for?
I think it's Steris, man.
Maybe Marcy.
So Steris was by far the loudest cheers.
Yeah.
Marcy and Wayne were probably about equal. There was
Wax.
like a smattering. There was a few people who bothered to cheer for Wax, which I thought was really interesting. I guess not surprising, but interesting.
Wax is such an interesting character because he's not like that interesting of a character, if that makes sense. He's an interesting character because he's not an interesting character.
But
he has interesting
Brandon
things
spent
happen
all
to
of
him.
all of Shadows of Self making you try to care about Wax because of his trauma around Lessie, which on my reread I actually picked up on a lot more and enjoyed. But still, like, no one cares about Wax.
I like Wax. I'm okay with them.
You would have cheered for him?
I don't know that I wouldn't have really cheered for anybody. I'm not really much of a cheerer.
Okay, so here are my thoughts on that, Stephen. One,
Okay.
Wax, okay, this is like the character thing, then the like kind of cultural thing. So Wax he has really bad things happen to him, but he doesn't make any mistakes. And he doesn't like pretty much everything he does is like the correct thing to do.
Oh yeah. Right.
So I think, which is like a fine character to have, but like I don't think it makes people really relate to that character, which leads me into, I think at a convention like Dragonsteel, where you get like the nerdiest of the nerds, again, this is not a bad thing, but like Wax is not a nerd. He's kind of like an alpha, like Chad guy.
Yeah. He's a Chad, basically.
Yeah.
And there weren't very many Chads at the convention.
Which is fine. Like, but I don't think that Dragonsteel is where you're gonna get the Chad cheers,
But Dragonsteel represents Brandon's reader base, right? So
well, no, I think it represents a very specific niche of Sanderson's reader.
So you think there are Chads that read Sanderson?
Yeah, man. I think there's Chads that read Sanderson.
Okay.
Working out at the gym, listening to Say Again the Sacred Oaths. Yeah, bench pressing.
But
I will get swole.
I'll see you in Hell, Sadius.
Journey before destination, you bastard. Yeah, okay, so, sure. There's like Chad lines. Like, okay, I'll give you that. But I feel like most of
to be clear, I don't think "See You in Hell, Sadius" is a line. I just made it up. But
yeah, no,
Journey before Destination Bastard is probably one of the best lines of the whole Cosmere, if not the best. But anyway,
it's a good line.
It's a great line. S tier line.
Anyway, I think you're onto something, Josh, but I think most of Sanderson's reader base is more of like the Steris side of things that connects more with characters who are vulnerable about struggles that they have, or I don't know, all kinds of like I mean everyone connects with Sanderson because like everyone in Stormlight is broken in different ways or has emotional things or physical things, or like there's someone to connect to in all of his books, and I think that's why everyone loves it so much. And
I agree, but some people connect to the alpha guy.
Yeah. So I guess that's why Wax exists.
I'm just saying, like, I think that there's a lot of those type of people out there that do like Sanderson.
Yeah.
And millions of people buy these books. Like,
yeah. Well, it just made me think, like, so another thing connected to this was this really made me inspired to start writing, like actually do it. And so
man,
right now I have a lot of momentum. I need to capitalize on this before I lose it. So I really need to start. But as I was thinking about how I want to go about writing, I was thinking, well, I need to have more like Steris type characters who are who've got issues and are like understanding of them and vulnerable about them. And I think that's like, is that what the fantasy book population connects to more? I
Yeah,
guess
well,
you probably need all kinds of characters, but
I think
people were cheering for
character work
Steris. They weren't cheering for Wax. That's my point.
That's a good
character
point.
work is definitely one aspect of what people connect to the story. The Sanderlanche is another aspect.
Yeah.
That's true.
I guess I'm going to plug right there. So we don't do a whole lot of things with our Patreon, and we don't plug it all that often. Thank you for those that do subscribe. But I've been doing the National Writing Month, National Novel Writing Month thing, and so I've been posting my as I go to the Patreon. So if you are a member of our Patreon, you can go check that out. Now, I'm not planning on having this published at all. This is kind of just like a writing exercise that I've been enjoying doing. But I've been turning out, like, I think I'm about at 16,000 words, got like 51.5 inch lines.
Nice.
Pages in. So like, there's an incentive for you. I might make it public to like everybody on Discord, but anyway, I've been having fun doing that. So
Yeah.
it's
When
been,
does the
it's been
next
really fun, Steven.
when does the next bundle of chapters come out? Or
I've been adding to that same
oh,
same
okay.
doc.
So I have more to read. I need to catch up.
Yeah, you can.
Nice. Okay.
I kind of just write. What I've been doing is like writing like a chapter, just like on an individual Word doc, and then or Google Doc, and then I'll like move it over to like main manuscript.
And are you working on this with Mackenzie at all?
Yeah. So Mackenzie, my wife, is working on it with me. We have it. There's like a past portion of the book and like a present portion of the book. She's writing the present, but she's not feeling like she really wants to share publicly what she's written so far. And so I'm obviously like much more open with this stuff. And I like, I'm kind of just like, here it is, I want to get better. So I need like, anything, people want to throw my way. I'm happy to, I'm treating it kind of like a writing group, I guess, where like I want to hear people's like thoughts and like kind of what they think could make it a little bit better. I'm not like ever looking to get this professionally published at all, so I don't have any like idea
for now.
No, not ever really.
Okay.
Mackenzie and I have talked about maybe doing like a podcast form where we release like where we record the episode, like the chapters, and release them as like a podcast instead of like an audiobook. So that might be fun. I could cross my fingers that gain traction that way, but like I don't ever, want to go send it to agents or anything.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah.
All right, that's a wrap. Hopefully I didn't offend any of my fellow con attendees by calling you nerds, because I was there as well, and I was obviously a nerd too.
We're all nerds.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Fantology Podcast. Welcome. I don't know why I'm calling other people nerds. That seems strange. But yeah, I mean, I'm planning on attending his future cons. I thought it was a blast. I really can't say enough how much I enjoyed it, and thank the team for putting it on. And I think they're going to get a lot of good feedback. One piece of negative feedback was the food options were not very good. They need to improve the food options because it was too cold. It was too cold to walk to the mall, and the food around was just like not very good, and there wasn't very much of it. So
do they control the food that's served at the con?
I don't know. I kind of don't think they do. So that's probably a whole separate thing. But maybe somehow they could have better food. That's what I would ask for.
Maybe get some food trucks or something around.
And I think there were
right?
Maybe, I don't know. I didn't look around a ton.
Okay, fair
All
enough.
right. See you guys later.
See you, Steven.
Bye.
Peace.